Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Micah Sutton, and I'm here with Mike Bader. Mike is the Sylvania School. He works in the Sylvania School system. He is the principal at the Timberstone Junior High School. They're out near Mitchell Road, and you're actually on Sylvania Road, I believe. Is that right, Mike?
Yeah, that's correct. Yep.
And he is the proud husband of Laura Bader, and she said yes just a few days ago, I think, or maybe it's a few years ago. I'm not.
It was a lot of years ago.
And I know some of their kids, fantastic kids, and he wrote his own bio for me. So what it says here is that he's also the president of the Micah Sutton Fan Club, which has a whopping 10 members. And I don't really know what to think about that. Number one, we have a fan club. Number two, it only has 10 members. I'm not sure what to say, but thank you for that. And then we also have Michele Seitzinger. She is the proud wife of Mark Seitzinger, who is just an incredible guy. She is learning more and more about being a member of the Micah Sutton Fan Club, apparently.
Is there a secret handshake is what I want to know.
Well, when you become a member, we'll talk about that.
Okay.
This is the most unique interview I've had thus far.
We're just getting warmed up.
So she has a 16-year-old daughter who she's homeschooled since preschool, and I know Liv. She's an incredible young lady, and then a 13-year-old son who they homeschooled through second grade, then has been attending Emmanuel Christian School, and he's an incredible young man as well. So she knows what homeschooling is all about, and the whole purpose of this, our interviews to date have really been focused on business and how to do business in a virus-focused world. And we're changing tacks just a little bit here and going to bring some content for some folks who maybe you're a parent that is now having to deal with the education of your child, and it's just not been your primary role. And so we thought we'd bring two experts into the conversation, Mike being a principal and Michele being a homeschool mom that has just done an incredible job, and just open up the conversation and start talking about some best practices, some different things that you might want to think about. And obviously our school system and our school year looks different this year than it's ever looked before. I've never seen a situation like what we're in right now. But before we go into best practices, let's just talk for a moment about the change that the students themselves are experiencing. And I was talking with Mike recently, and he was sharing with me some of the situations and unique changes that students that come from a homeschool environment to a public school environment, some of the changes that they face. And so, Mike, would you just talk to us a little bit about that and maybe what that could look like in reverse order as students that are primarily in public school are moving into a homeschool type environment?
Yeah, I can talk about that a little bit. It's not like we get, dozens and dozens of students that, transfer in from a homeschooling environment, but you can kind of understand a little bit now, like what all of my students are going through, because they're obviously normally in the school environment and now being homeschooled. But no matter how you slice it, there's an adjustment there. And I know when we get students that have been at home for a long period of time, it could be a bit of a challenge for them because they're used to kind of making their own schedule and being at home. And, then when you throw them in the mix with, in our case, 650 6th, 7th, and 8th graders and trying to figure out that whole socialization piece and, going from class to class and lockers and that whole thing can be a bit of a challenge. But I think what we all, realize pretty quickly is kids are very resilient, much more resilient and resourceful sometimes than the adults are. And boy, it is impressive because they figure it out pretty quickly. But there is an adjustment period, trying to make new friends and things of that nature. So it can be a challenge for the kids.
So if you have a child that's been in public school 90% of their schooling time or experience, and then they move into a homeschool, you're talking about students that are coming from a homeschool environment where their schedule is a little bit maybe looser, and they're coming into a more structured environment. What might it look like? And maybe Michele, you can speak to this because you have students in both sides. what might it look like for a student, and what may be some of the challenges for a student that's coming from a structured environment into potentially a little less of a structured environment?
Yeah, you did mention our son is a junior high student at Emmanuel Christian, so he is doing that distance learning now, and it was very abrupt. We found out on a Thursday that the following Monday we were going to start distance learning. So very sharp learning curve as to what does this look like. So for these students, no, they're used to that structured, organized day. They're used to being directed about what to do next by the teachers, and having that oversight that they're actually accomplishing what the goals for the class are. And now they're in the structure where, the parent, they might feel like, well, you're not my teacher. So why are you trying to tell me what to do today? And they might feel at a loss, like, what do I do next? Do I try to follow the school schedule, or do I have the freedom to pick and choose what I work on when? So in our home, we're giving them that freedom as long as they're getting the work done, and all the educational goals are being met. We're trying to give them that freedom.
Right. What, either one of you jump in on this. What are some of the emotional, mental challenges that a student might face when trying to make that shift? Because we are in unprecedented times, and as adults, we are processing things. And I'm working with parents with adults all the time that are working to process this. And some of them are dealing with emotional struggles, at least emotional moments while processing all of this. What could some of our kids be dealing with, and maybe what's a good way to handle those things?
Michelle, you want to go?
Well, I'll just share what I'm sensing. It's very normal for all of us to be experiencing some sense of anxiety, fear, even depression, grief. There are things that we're all losing through this pandemic. Especially I think of the poor seniors, all that they're losing, their last quarter of high school. Even our homeschool co-op, we're missing out on our last 3 gatherings, and our seniors, there's a lot that kids are losing. So we need to acknowledge the grief they're going through, the stages of grief, and how it can manifest itself through anger, depression, anxiety, withdrawal. So we need to prioritize, I think, our children's emotional, mental, and physical well-being right now. I mean, their education is important, but I think that takes a back seat to these more important issues. Talking together, like, do you have anything you're worried about or concerned about? And find ways to reassure our children. A phrase I'm hearing about the distance learning that's going on now is called crisis learning. And even homeschooling my daughter, it really is during a crisis. It's a whole different experience than just normal homeschooling. We need to address the fact that there's a crisis going on right now, and there may be things going on in your family that are more important than the education maybe today. Or maybe there's a day next week where maybe our priority is getting unemployment lined up, or figuring out how's the health of my family? Is everyone feeling good? Taking temperatures and watching for symptoms. Maybe we need to figure out what groceries do we need to get? Do I need to get lined up on a pickup at a grocery store? I was on last night. I started at 11:30 at night, bouncing back and forth between Kroger and Meijer. And it took me until about 1 in the morning to get onto a website and place my order. We need to recognize we have some priorities right now that might supersede the education, and that's okay. Our children's well-being is our first priority.
Amen. What do you think, Mike?
Well, I think it's almost like Michelle and I have worked together or something in the past, because she made a perfect segue. What I'd like to point out is, that she's very right about the whole well-being of the student. As a matter of fact, we've been not to let the cat out of the bag, but we've been having some conversations in the last 3 days about the schoolwork that the kids are responsible for, and talking about grading. Our students feel a lot of pressure, not only at the junior high but at the high school about grading. Like, what's my grade going to be? And we're kind of taking that into consideration, and there could be some possible changes as far as how students are going to be graded, because we're looking more at like getting some work completion done and so on. Because again, and Michelle's right, this is hard for everybody in many different ways, and everybody's situation is unique.
Right.
But parents that are normally maybe at work, and then kids are at school, maybe they're at home working, and now they're having the challenge of trying to guide their kids through schoolwork, when they normally maybe just help for a little bit in the evening. And then you throw into the mix, I know my teachers are very worried and concerned about the kids, not only from an academic standpoint, but just from an emotional standpoint. So you gotta, I guess what I would say, paraphrasing what Michele said, is, you sort of have to take a step back and try to realize, what's really important here. And not diminishing schoolwork, because it is important, but we've got to take care of ourselves, and what work we can get done from a school standpoint. Because again, parents are struggling because they're trying to get their selves taken care of as far as work and so on. And again, and the big thing too with the kids that I've talked to on the phone, or parents that I've communicated with, is that whole socialization piece. Kids a lot of times, especially in junior high, they don't want to admit that school is fun. That maybe that's not cool. But boy, they sure are missing, being around their friends and being around their teachers. And like Michele said, maybe a simple example is, the homeschoolers that are doing their meetings or whatever term she referred to. Even our kids that are, we had over 90 kids out for our track team this spring. A lot of kids that normally participate in athletics, and sometimes some of them maybe took a risk and they're going out for a sport. And now they're not, probably not going to have the opportunity to do that. So there's a lot of moving parts, and we're all trying to do our best. But I think we do all need to do a better job of sort of stepping back and trying to figure out what's important here, what really matters.
I think it's so great that both of you are so very familiar and fluent in discussing this, because I do believe that the emotional impact of this is lost, could be lost on parents, as we're working hard to, one, keep jobs, to facilitate the job that we have, if it's being done via Zoom or other online platforms. We're so focused on keeping everybody safe, and keeping everybody fed, and keeping everybody housed, and keeping the income coming in that we can, and making all of the adjustments, that it could be that parents would say to a student, sit at the table, get your work done, and in essence, leave me alone. And I think that we're in a more interactive time than that. And we have to be particularly intentional about it. And I want to be clear, I don't think any parent is just trying to slough off their child, or any parent has any negative intention. It's about being intentionally aware that your student, even if they're not telling you that they're going through a difficult time, or that they're upset, or that they're concerned, they may not voice it, but they will act it out. They will act it out with an attitude that's not normal for them. They will act it out by not wanting to come out of the room and interact. They'll act it out by snappy comebacks, or making everything a joke, or not wanting to do their schoolwork, or wanting to do only their schoolwork. I mean, there's so many expressions that this could take. And am I right? Am I wrong? What are your thoughts?
I try to watch for the red flags for anxiety. It's, it can come out as anger. It can come out as disrespect, disobedience. And, we need to learn to recognize our children's hearts. This is not how my child normally behaves. Let's get to the root of the issue. There's got to be some fear and anxiety going on in almost all the children, if they have any awareness of what's going on right now. So we need to respond in a Christ-like way. When our children are responding in a way that isn't, we can model to them that the peace that passes understanding, even when what we're we're seeing from them isn't the healthiest behavior. That can be so reassuring for them and help calm them down and bring them to a healthier place mentally and emotionally. So, and this might be the hardest time for us to speak calmly to our children and not snap back in anger, because boy, we're under some stress too. Let's be real, the reality of the situation. But if we could just start the day with our children before we get into everything else we know we need to do, if we could just start the day with a age-appropriate devotion with our children and a little bit of prayer time. I talk about getting the big rocks into the day first, fitting them into the container, and then you fit the less important things around it. Boy, and I think anchoring to God. When you're home with your children now, this is an opportunity where maybe during the school year, you had to rush out the door and get them to school, and you didn't have that good time to set the tone of the day with God. So I think that'll help everything else, the rest of the day, the issues that we're facing as adults. It'll help us through that. It'll help our children immensely if we could start our day that way. And then tell them what we picture the day unfolding like. Like, I picture you working on these things, and I'll try to be available if you need my help during this particular window of time. But just please be patient with me and forgive me if I'm not. I think as parents, we need to be humble with our children and confess that this is challenging for us too, but we're going to do our best, leaning on God and trusting Him to provide.
Confess when we're not angry. Confess when we're calm.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes our confessions come as a reaction to the child does something, and we say, wait, you don't think that I'm under any stress too? And that's not really a helpful confession.
No, it isn't. No, we come back when we're calm and we confess that.
Right. What's your thoughts, Mike?
Well, I agree with what she's saying. I think, again, it's, I think we all need to be good at pressing pause and sort of taking a step back and realizing that, it's not easy for anybody. I got an email last night. I was copied on an email last night from a parent who normally works outside the home and has a student that has some academic challenges. And, she's at home now trying to get her job done and working long hours and on Zoom and the phone and so on. And was just expressing that it's just struggled, trying to get her child to do work, trying to help, trying to work. And again, I don't mean to keep going back to that, but it's a challenge for everybody. And so I think it's important for people to press pause and kind of take a deep breath and do the best that they can do with the schoolwork and make sure that everybody's okay with what they're doing.
I've said this to people about marriage. I've said this to people about finances. I've said this to people about all kinds of areas of life. I don't know that I've ever said it about education, but the truth is that the next 3 months or so of educational opportunities will not be the thing that makes or breaks your child's educational success in life and their ability to move forward. It'll be a cumulative thing, and it will have an impact, no doubt about it. But it won't be this particular span of time that is the answer to either great success or breaking it all. That's a great point. Now let's move back towards bringing structure. Michele, you said that whenever we are talking to our kids, we're understanding them emotionally. We're spending that time with Christ. We're guiding them and leading them in those areas. But then at the same time, you began to cast a vision. You said, I see the day going like this. Mike, would you kind of talk potentially about what a structure could, from a scholastic standpoint in school, which is very structured, is there a place for that kind of structure in the home as you see it and are hearing feedback?
I think a lot of it depends on the child. I was talking to a parent the other day, it was yesterday as a matter of fact, and she was telling me a little bit about how her son was in a little bit of trouble for making some bad choices. But this is a young man that is pretty active. And so we had a conversation about, chunking up the work a little bit. I think it's pretty hard. I think some parents maybe have this vision or an expectation that the kids are going to sit there and they're going to do their work for the whole entire day. And I don't think, they don't do that when they're here at school. Classes are 42 minutes long. They've got time in between class to socialize with their friends. They get time for lunch. Then they go to elective areas where it's maybe not quite as structured, whether it's PE or an art class. So I think each family has to decide what they think is best for their child. And again, I keep going back to it, not being so rigid. There needs to be some flexibility there. And yeah, you want, but then, you do talk to some parents that maybe think that their kid functions best on a schedule. And maybe you get started right away at 8 o'clock, and maybe they work all the way through noon and get the majority of their work done. And if that works well for their child, then I say go for it. But again, the whole flexibility piece, I think, needs to be in place, and whatever works best. But having a student, whether it's junior high or high school, sitting in front of the screen for multiple hours at a time without breaks and things of that nature, I think is going to create a problem down the road. You have to be flexible and let the kids kind of maybe even make their own schedule. But again, it's easy for me to say, but I know some parents, if they're working, things may have to be set up a certain way and so on. So, but I think flexibility is a good thing to be keeping in mind when we're trying to get through this time with doing the work at home.
That's awesome. Any input on that, Michele?
Yeah, I know in the younger ages, I think the focus is more on reading and math, and the science and the history happens at certain point during the week, but maybe not every day of the week. So I know homeschooling families who pick one day of the week to do a chunk of science or do a chunk of history, and it's more focused on that, and that's beneficial. So I say, especially with your younger children, don't feel like they have to do every subject every day of the week. I found with homeschooling that individual learning goes much faster than classroom learning. I mean, I teach classes at a homeschool co-op, so I know in the class setting, you go at the pace of the class. There's a different rhythm to the learning than there is when it's one-on-one. So don't make your children spend 6 hours on school just because they're at the school building for 6 hours a day. They're going to be much more efficient with their time doing it individually. And I like to set an order to the day, like what our priorities are, what we'd like to accomplish. Take brain breaks. Those are wonderful. When they accomplish something that's challenging or just did a big chunk of work, let's pause and recognize what they've accomplished, cheer them on.
You said take brain breaks.
Brain breaks. That's where you do something physical, jog around the house, have a race, turn on some music and dance, jumping jacks, play a game, tell some jokes, just step back from the school and do something totally different. But if you take these brain breaks, it gets the blood flowing back up into your brain, so they'll be ready to come back and focus refreshed. And it's good for us as adults to remember to do that too, because we might be doing trying to get a lot of work done at home and need to try to make the most of the time, but those brain breaks are good for us adults too.
That's fantastic. So if you had to summarize just a couple of bullet pointed best practices from each of your perspectives, Mike, what would you give us as some bullet point best practices for parents that are now teaching their children at home?
Well, again, press pause, take a deep breath, be patient. Sometimes easier said than done. I have 6 children of my own. None of them that are in K-12 school right now, but again, that's easier said than done at times. But be patient and be flexible, and don't be afraid to reach out to your child's teacher. I know our counselors are working with a lot of parents, helping guide them through some things. Again, I think our district has done a really nice job of getting things organized with the kids and doing support from a technology standpoint, and really focusing as a district on the well-being of the kids and trying to make sure that they're getting what they need, but yet not overwhelming them with a bunch of work and so on. But yeah, be flexible and just be able to take a deep breath and put things in perspective as far as what's important for the day, and go from there.
Okay, Michele?
Well, I like what Mike said about being flexible. Boy, while you're at the home, the kids can do school in so many different places. Let them go out on the back deck or put a blanket under a tree. If they have a swing set with the fort, that's a really cool place to do your school. If it's a rainy day, set up a blanket tent city in your living room and give them a lantern. We can do things to lighten their hearts while they're having to do school in this such unusual circumstances. And we can still be creating some happy, good, healthy memories for them during this really hard season. So I'd say focus on their well-being and try to create happy memories. Don't stress so much about the academics. If all you accomplish is helping them to not leak too much of what they've already learned the first 3 quarters of the school year, then you're doing an awesome job.
That's very well said. I believe in our show notes, we're going to have a link to a website that's the Sylvania School department has put together for just additional helps that parents can access to as we're all in this unique situation. The blanket fort thing was brilliant. I think that's awesome. And the idea of doing your schoolwork in other places, I'm going to do that. I'm not doing schoolwork, but I'm going to create a blanket fort in my living room, and I'm going to do my work in the blanket fort. That's going to be awesome.
Post that on Facebook. You'll get a lot of likes on that.
I think if you do that, Micah, you're going to have Christy make you some of her fancy homemade baked goods so you can have those in your fort with you, because otherwise it won't be much fun.
I 100% agree. Now, one thing was brought up that I thought was interesting here, and I didn't hit it at the time. You said crisis schooling. And the question was asked, is distance learning that's happening now the same thing as overall homeschooling? You want to speak?
Could I answer that one? I
Sure.
feel like I'm in such a unique position because I've been homeschooling for years. And I've also had a son at Emmanuel Christian for 5 or 6 years now. So we're doing both, and I'm seeing what it looks like. The distance learning, it's not the same thing as homeschooling. I've picked my daughter's curriculum, and I've set her goals. I have the teacher manual, so I have all the keys,
Right.
so I can help her out more. Distance learning, there are already teachers who put a lot of thought into the curriculum and into the goals, and they're guiding my son's education from a distance. So it's like I said earlier, we're the teacher's aides, and with our younger children, they're going to need more individual attention from us at times. Your younger kids, sit down and read to them just to remind them the joy of reading. If you don't have a lot of time to help them, if they're still in the middle of learning to read, if you can just remind them of the joy of reading during the season, and don't get too bogged down in the details, it's amazing how quickly children learn. A lot of what they're missing now, they're going to catch up. It's amazing. They're sponges, and they're learning even when they're not doing official curriculum from the school. They just learn so well.
That's fantastic, and very well said. One question that springs to mind for you, Mike, is this. I was talking to a father recently who is a very educated gentleman, and he was shocked because his son is, I think, in 5th or 6th grade, and he was shocked with the difficulty that he was having helping his son with math. And I mean, this guy knows how to do math, but he just has not done math like this in a very long time. And so any suggestions as to where parents could get some help in those types of situations?
Well, again, I think the best resources, and I know this has gone on, is parents reaching out to teachers via email and contacting them. And I know a lot of my teachers have been producing some little mini videos and doing some lessons, they'll record online and share with parents. But I know that our teachers here in the building, and they're very good about getting back with parents and helping out. And sometimes that's hard to do over an email, but there's been a lot of phone conversations and guiding parents through that process. But again, it's not easy. I know we'll get, then it's hard with some of the subjects, but I'll get feedback from parents, boy, I can tell it's been a long time since I've been in school, because I'll try to help somebody with math, my daughter with math, and I can barely get through it. And so, yeah, that's a challenge. But kind of going along with what Michele said, it's interesting, not to get off track here, but I've been a little disturbed with some of the things, a couple of things I've heard on the news or the radio regarding comments that people are making about, well, maybe when we go through something like this, we'll realize that we don't need, brick and mortar schools, for whether it's for higher ed or for schools. And boy, that just kind of gets the, my blood boiling a little bit, because I think we're going to find the total opposite with something like this. As long as I've been doing this, the one thing that I've really enjoyed watching over the years is teachers building relationships with kids, in the classroom, after school, whether it's coaching or an academic sport. And boy, kids sitting at home, doing what they're doing now, it makes that a real challenge, which is probably like, Michele's addressing some of the different activities that some of her kids have done through homeschooling, which again, shows the significance of doing that. But boy, the relationships that, the kids are missing out with their teachers and their peers, their school counselors, the custodians, I can go on and on, the bus drivers, those are important relationships. And I think that's one thing that is again, creating some anxiety with the kids. And for those people that think that we don't need, the schools or brick and mortar buildings to do that, I think they're, quite frankly, don't really have any idea what they're talking about. Just my opinion.
Sure.
Yeah, I think, some families can't homeschool and some families shouldn't homeschool. And there are pros and cons to all the choices. And it's definitely not a one size fits all. And there are benefits, definitely. I'm seeing my son at Emmanuel Christian. He is just wilting without his friendships that he's seeing there, and getting on Zoom or a subject that maybe is not his favorite subject, but to have that time with his friends and his teacher, I can tell it affects him. And and even me talking with the two of you, this is like the highlight of my week.
Oh, well,
talking to someone outside of the home.
It's funny, Michele, I was talking to a friend of mine who works in the district, and she's a kindergarten teacher over at Stranahan, and she was telling me that she'll do groups of like 4 with her kindergarten kids. And she said, just the look on their face when they see her, even though it's on the camera, she said it just makes her day, which kind of goes back to what I'm saying. It's all about building these relationships. And sometimes I think we truly do underestimate, the power that a teacher or a coach or an academic advisor, a school counselor has on kids. And it's one of the great rewards that I have with my job. And I think that's what, again, I think that's going to create a struggle for us, especially if we don't wind up coming back to school this year. It's going to be really hard on the kids not being able to, and you've seen that with your son at Emmanuel, and how he's struggling with that as well. So it's tough on the kids. It really is.
Well, I tell you what, I appreciate having both of you here with us, and I'm really praying. In fact, I'm intending to do another interview specifically talking about how to help seniors navigate this situation, because I do think our senior class this year is struggling in a way that most others are not. Just because there are some milestones that they are missing right now that they've been looking forward to their entire scholastic career, and now they're at this place where they're the big dogs on campus, if you will, and they're the senior on the football team or on the in whatever aspect they interact in the culture and the society of the school. But bottom line, they're struggling, and so we're keeping them in our prayers. I did not ask either of you this question, but I would like to ask one of you, if you would you just pray over the parents and over the students that are walking through this? And we've concluded each one of our interviews with just a time of prayer for those that we are addressing in the interview. And so would one of you, maybe Michele, would you mind praying over those parents and those students that are walking through this together today?
Yes, I'd be glad to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lord, we just come to you so thankful that you are the rock that we can lean on through these challenging times. And you promise that you will not leave us or forsake us. But you've given us your comforter, the Holy Spirit, to guide us and direct us in all things. And I know that includes our children's education and their physical, their spiritual, their mental health, Lord. You want to direct us in how to care best for our children. So I pray that you opened up all our minds and our hearts to press into you and to hear from you. Help us to be willing to do things in new ways to best benefit our families. Help us, Lord, to have faith that you are with us and that you are going to guide us. Help us to show our children in more tangible ways our faith in you so that they can catch it from us. We want to build up their faith through this season, Lord. And I just pray that you give us joy and peace with our families during this season as the storms roll around us, Lord. Help us to fix our eyes on you and not on the waves, trusting in you, Lord. We love you. We praise you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. I have been very impressed, Mike, by the response of the Sylvania school system, just across the board. And I've heard numerous praises of our teachers and all of those engaged, the administration, from the top down. I've just heard really, really strong compliments being given to our Sylvania school system. And I've been able to see into a little bit of the TPS, Toledo Public School System. And Dr. Durant seems to be just really leading strong and doing everything that they can to make sure that the students are cared for and loved. And so I just want to give a shout out to all of our teachers, all of our administrators, all of everybody working in the school systems right now. You are going above and beyond. You're having to go above and beyond. And so we just thank you. Thank you for caring enough about the kids. This is when it goes beyond the job and it becomes a revelation of a calling in one way or another. And we honor you for that and thank you for it. And thank you, Mike, for leading strong at Timberstone Junior High and being a leader in our community. We honor you and thank you both for your time today.
It's our pleasure.
You're welcome. It was an honor.
Amen. Thank you.